Hello, team, and welcome to episode 33, a long time ago, right here in this galaxy. And this class will be talking about one of my favorite things on the planet, which are stories. And you'll notice that I like a story, a good story, whether it has dragons or spaceships or normal, everyday stories. I love them. And personally, I think it's one of the only ways that we really learn and grow because at least for me, I had trouble in school with chemistry, and it didn't make sense. I couldn't fit it into what I knew. It didn't seem real, so I had a lot of trouble with it. But when I could understand, oh, that makes sense because of this, it always felt like it was kind of told in the form of a story. So we will be doing this in two parts. Today we will be talking about your own stories and seeing where we can pull some stories out of. And next week, we will talk about the benefits of reading and evolving in stories, specifically for vocab. So let's see what we've got. First up, quick little video, how stories shape our minds. Really cool. It's quick. I think it's about 4 minutes. Okay, less than 5 minutes. And let me see. What was a story cartoon book you enjoyed as a child? What was a lesson it taught? Well, in terms of cartoons, I remember the 90s. And with most of the books I read, they involve somebody finds out they're spectral, they get a sword, and they need to defeat a villain. And I think in the 90s, the themes of the cartoons were about you can do whatever you want. I actually think it's a little bit dangerous, but I do think I grew up in a very creative generation. Now, with the sword and sorcery books, it's usually about doing what's right to overcome something difficult. It seems to be the general theme of most successful science fiction and fantasy books. And it's not about, whether dragons are real. It's about showing people that you can kill the dragons in your life. You can beat them. So I guess those would be the lessons that the 90s cartoons or fantasy books teach. And team, if we're telling a story, I want you to think of the past. In Portuguese, it's a little bit different, history, story, but I like to compare it to music and song. So you can say that I like Leonard Skinner's music, but my favorite song is Simple Man. So a song is a unit, music is the theme. It's the same thing with history and story. History is the theme. And for grammar purposes, just avoid saying a history. Talking about a story, a unit, one. So in Portuguese, we separate it with history being fiction and stories being, history being nonfiction and stories being fiction. But in English, it does not matter. Story is a unit, history is a theme. You can talk about the history of the world, the history of Brazil. You can also talk about the history of Harry Potter. But let me tell you a story, whether it happened yesterday or, Alice in Wonderland. They all count. And when we tell a story, we're talking about the past. And in the future, in English, we have two basic tools. We have the going tos and the wills. In the present, it's not that complex either. And the past, even though it's still much less complex than Portuguese, is the worst one. We have three and a half, four options here. And I want to go over them so that you can practice them inside your stories. I think it's one of the best ways to practice the past tense is to tell one. And first off, we have the past simple and we have the past continuous. And I'm going to compare them. If I say that I watched the game yesterday, this game is finished, it's done, cool, you watched it. What was the score? But if I say I was watching the game, all of a sudden, I'm bringing the listener back into the action. And in English, for both of them, we need a specific time in the past. And specific is very vague. If I say when I was younger, in school, that time, when I went to Italy, all of these count as a specific time. I would say with the past continuous, it is a little bit more specific. And we usually do this in one of two ways. You can say, for example, she was watching TV. This was happening when the phone rang. And then you have a second action that kind of cuts it. Or I can say, what were you doing at this time yesterday? So we have a time and I was studying. It goes through it. The exception would be while. So I can say that, she was studying while he was playing soccer. So you have two kind of parallel actions. It's okay too. Number three, and I would say this is the most complex, the most annoying, the one my students kind of hate me a little bit for, is the past perfect. The good news, it's also the one you will least use. Now, imagine that I was at the mall and I tell you that I watched Deadpool and I ate McDonald's. Do you know the order? Probably not. Now, we use had when you specifically want to say that something happened before the other. So, for example, I had McDonald's before going to the movies. I had seen the movie when I went to McDonald's. And I'm not going to say it's the only, it's not even close, but it's the most common way I will hear something. I will hear the past perfect is when people say, for example, oh, I had never done this before. You did it, but you had never done it before. I hadn't ever been to this place. So we sometimes use it to say that I had never done something and then boom, you did it one day in the past. And another way of interpreting the past perfect is like when you watch an episode of a series and all of a sudden, boom, explosion, poof, poof, gunshot, somebody running out of the bank, the alarm going off. And then all of a sudden it goes 48 hours earlier. So the 48 hours earlier would be the past, and or like the past of the story in this case. So I think it's a good reference. And our half, which I think is worth mentioning, is used to. So when you say used to, you're specifically informing the listener that this is not true anymore, or at least not habitual. If I say I used to swim, you understood that I swum regularly, and now maybe I don't as much. It doesn't mean like I don't get in the water, but it's not a habit. So used to is used to emphasize that something is not true now. And challenge, make a 3-sentence story about something you did this week that you hadn't done in a long time. Try to use all 4 if you can. Okay. And let me see. What did you have for breakfast today? I always have pretty much the same breakfast, 5 eggs and some fruit. But what were you doing while eating? I hope not, but I was probably checking my phone. So that's my guess. Team, our talking point, the value of stories. I'm a big fan. I think that they are important. You might disagree. And so I think the first thing we can do is define what a story is. What do you understand as a story? Who tells the best stories in your friend circle? An example of storytelling being used professionally. It can be at school as well. Where you often tell stories. Some people are more natural storytellers than others, but I do believe everybody has their moment. Whether you focus on things, the what, on how things are done, or even the why of things, I think everybody tells stories. And the differences between short form, those 1-minute reels that everybody loves, the TikToks, and long form stories. What is the difference? You watch a series that has 10 seasons. One Piece has reached episode 1,000 and something, and the other ones that are 1 minute long. And 5-star recommendation, amazing book. If you like science fiction, space, it's a little bit violent, but it kind of reminded me of Hunger Games on Mars. It's actually right here. Those are the trilogy right there, and it's amazing. So if you're looking for a little bit of a challenge and you want some action, break the chains, as they'll say in the book, and that's my recommendation. Let me see. Last up, your story. So, team, of course, there's not just one way to tell a story, but there is kind of a basic outline you can follow. So, you'll start with the exposition. What does this mean? What context does the listener need? So, in Lord of the Rings, we start, we see the Shire, we learn what hobbits are, we understand that we are not here on Earth. Conflict. What gets the ball rolling? What starts the action? So, in that case, they have the ring. And the ring is the Sauron's ring, and that starts the problem. Rising action, keep throwing problems at this. The Lost special, just be sure you're able to resolve these problems later. Don't leave loose ends. But Gandalf disappears. They split up. Boromir dies. Lots of different problems. Saruman is a bad guy. I'm sorry if I'm spoiling Lord of the Rings for you, but it's been, I think, over 20 years, so it's your fault if you haven't seen it. And so it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And then the climax, oh my God, Frodo and Sam are almost at Mordor. Um, you know, um, we have Aragorn at the gates charging Mordor. So it's that moment where you say everything is lost. And falling action, what happens afterwards? The world is saved. Woo, we're good. Sauron has been defeated. And resolution, everybody goes their separate ways. Some people to the Elven lands and others back to the Shire. So let me answer one more. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is conflict to a good story? 11. Imagine if I tell you guys, team, I woke up and everything was normal and everything was good. And then I worked and I followed my routine and, I watched some TV at the end, maybe got on my phone a little bit and fell asleep. It's not that good of a story, no matter how lively I try to tell it. So team, have fun with this. Our ultimate goal is for you to start finding stories in your life. Register them. Make a point of identifying them. Not even for English purposes. It'll make your life better. Saying, something interesting happened today. So use this as some cheap, fun English practice. Thank you, and I'll see you in class.